York's classic rock, Q1043.
Ken Dashow's Beatles Revolution. We talk about so many aspects of what music has meant to us in classic rock. Classic music is what it's about. It's about songwriting. And I've fallen in love with great songwriting. And the gentleman joining me here, Mr. Jimmy Webb. Maybe you don't know the name. Can I mention some songs? MacArthur Park, Galveston, Worst That Could Happen, Brooklyn Bridge, Up and Away, Fifth Dimension, All I Know, Art Garfunkel, Didn't We, Sinatra. By the time we get to Phoenix, Wichita Lineman, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. The Highwaymen, I love it. Jimmy Webb, welcome, welcome,
Hey,
welcome.
thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
If you guys have never seen Jimmy perform his songs, you have missed a treat. City Winery, Sunday, October 7th. This is absolutely a place to be. He's on the City Winery tour. And I don't know if you remember, it was a few years back at the Cutting Room, and I said to you, I just want to gush about the quality of your songwriting. It's a little thing, but I've always focused on Wichita lineman. That a good songwriter begins, I'm a lineman for the county, worked the main railroad, searched in the sun for another overload. It's beautiful. But most songwriters, the second verse would be, and there's this gal back in so-and-so. And you skip that with that one line that punches my heart every time. I hear you singing in the wires. Because I get it. I know. I don't need to know. And her name is Sue, and she's back in Kalamazoo. I got it. The loneliness just punches you in the face. It's phenomenal.
Well, thank you for that. I'm sorry for the audible crash in the background. That was some mishap in the pantry.
No problem at all.
I'll continue. I'm glad that the line has that impact for you. It's more of an instinctual thing for me. It's not like I'm sitting and thinking, gee, how am I going to slap this guy in the face with the next line, because I really want to be, the best songwriter in the world. It's always been like a really instinctual process for me, and it's the way I paint. I've always envied painters when they, especially the magnificently, like maritime scene of the sailing ships, in full sail, and the waves and that I truly envied. The only way I can get close to that is with words. And I just, with as few words as possible, try to evoke a sense of place or ambiance, the surround of where is this guy and what is he feeling? And that's kind of my milieu. That's where I work.
The greats all have that sense, economy of words. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Paul Simon, the people of your era, Jimmy Webb. The poem tells such a heartbreaking story or a happy story, but you get so involved in their lives and you see the growth. Obviously, I'm a huge Beatles fan, but to grow from She Loves You, Yeah, 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 great dance music explodes. And then so quickly to say, okay, we did that. Now let's dig in here a little bit. Let's write some songs from the heart. And there's we talk about honest songwriting. You've had experiences like that where people think every song is literal, but it's an honest emotion. That's what I think punches through when everybody makes a request. Somebody, a dear one passed away. Can you play this song?
Right.
It's a real gift to be able to feel an emotion and share it with people.
I just a comment about the Beatles. I don't want to gloss over that because the Beatles were a big thing in songwriting. It centers around somehow the question of how do you get from "She Loves You" to Eleanor Rigby?
Exactly.
What is the territory between those two songs? And that is obviously a couple of young, really talented writers deciding that they really want to be more creative than just, you know, I love you, you love me, you know, you're my squeeze, you know, I'm on my knees, please. Uh, you know, they made what I'm getting at is they made a conscious effort to take that road. And then I see them as painters. I see, you know, when I hear Penny Lane, you know, I see Penny Lane. I'm there. I mean, you know, if you're not there, you're not listening. You know, the words are just linked together beautifully and chosen with so much forethought and with and with so much vision for that moment in McCartney's past. That place is evoked, um, and so they were very very important to me. Um,
When did you first aware with it? Because the interesting thing about talking with you, Jimmy, you're not just of the age. I mean, I was a young boy in the '60s and loving the music, but you're a contemporary. I don't want to say the word competitor, but in a sense, it's the greatest period of writing and performance we've had. To me, it's a renaissance of music, '60s into the '70s, whatever you want to call it. You had to be damn good to get a song on the radio between Jimmy Webb, New York Tin Pan Alley, Motown, and England. You had to be damn good to get a song onto the radio to get a hit.
well, it was the fruition, in my mind. It was the fruition of the excuse me, the Brill Building generation. Really, it was Carole King
Yep.
and Cynthia Weil and Barry Mann, and to some degree, guys like Teddy Randazzo, who wrote uh, "Hurt So Bad" and I think I'm going out of my head. And, you know, some of these real, I don't know, these kind of late rock, late '50s, early '60s kind of masterpieces, uh, and uh, they were another generation entirely. I mean, their generation just before me. I'm at home. as 14, 15 years old, listening to Goffin and King, you know, and so I think that that's where the seeds of technical expertise. That's where they were painted. It was really fallout from the Brill Building,
So I
and
listened as a teenager. You're listening as a teenager. Did you always have a sense that you wanted to write songs, or did that come later in life?
I wrote a song in Oklahoma City when I was 12 years old called "Someone Else." Uh,
Okay, that answers that question pretty well.
and then I don't know. I don't know the exact moment when I suddenly thought, well, this is really a possibility, because at some point, you know, the dream really becomes an obsession. That's a kind of a fulcrum, I think, of a very necessary change that takes place in a person. Because up until that point, it's just fun. You're just hanging out, or you're just lamenting over your last, you know, disappointment in the romantic world. We all had plenty of those, right?
Right, of course.
And we went and we solved them. We solved that pain or that feeling of rejection in different ways. I think that songwriters almost unanimously use music as an escape from the pain of adolescence and teenage years and the sort of flimsy little love affairs that we went through, and the
It's a
the
lovely line.
and every one of them was the real,
Of
she's the
course.
one,
Of course.
and so much pain, my God. But if the reaction, I think, is important. It's what you do with the pain, and songwriting is a good thing to do with the pain
You
because
know,
it's
there are people
creative.
the people we lost who were brilliant songwriters who weren't strong enough to get through it. Kurt Cobain comes to mind. You know, they're this
Uh-huh.
big watershed second album. He's developed a new sound, kind of. It's punk, but there's songwriting in these angry guitars. And the album is called Nevermind. And if you
Yeah.
just think about that, like he just wasn't cut out to do it, to survive it. You know, the Paul McCartneys and Mick Jaggers of the world were born to be on that stage. That's what it pulls them like their heartbeat. And this poor guy, and the chorus is, "Here we are now, entertain us." Like you just, that was not, you were not as good as you were on stage and singing these songs. It was a path that you didn't have the whatever strength to follow. It was crushing to him, and it crushes me because it's a lost life, but there was so much more poetry to come out of that man. There was so much. He never got to add so many more songs into the world like that. And
Well, I empathize with that. I had a friend who was a brilliant songwriter, Harry Nielsen,
oh, brilliant!
who never did a live. Well, he did a video special for the BBC that was really beautiful. That was produced by uh, oh well, um,
Yeah,
Derek Taylor. As a matter of
right,
fact,
got
the
it.
Beatles publicist
Yeah,
produced Harry's album for the BBC, and it was lovely. But he was adamant that he wouldn't appear in front of an audience. I could never understand it. I would say, let's make a band. I'll play piano and you'll sing, and that's what I always wanted to do anyway. I was just a frustrated guy who wanted to be like a Beatle. He he was too. Only he sort of became like
well, yeah, he
quasi.
and John Lennon. You know those
Yeah,
guys.
he sort of got where he wanted to go with that because it was like, and then him and Ringo also,
Yeah,
all best friends, at one time or another.
it's funny how much they meant to me, to the world. And I'm talking with Jimmy Webb. By the way, you can see him, Jimmy, sing his song "City Winery" October 7th, Sunday night. Wouldn't miss that for the world. The Yes,
Excuse me. It is Friday, October 7th.
thank you. Sorry.
That's not you. That's information that just came in on my end.
That
So
damn the damn interwebs had the date wrong. Friday, October 7th. Jimmy at City Winery here in New York City, and you've been doing the City Winery tour, going out, and for everybody, there's a book. Thank you for sending this to me, Jimmy. "The Cake and the Rain." As anyone who ever knew MacArthur Park, that one line, "Someone left the cake out in the rain." I can't imagine you write that and say, that's something that the whole world is going to quote for the next 50 years.
now
Nobody has the balls to go, well, that'll last forever.
I didn't think any of it was going to last forever. I thought some of it, and by that I mean Burt Bacharach and Hal David. I mean all of it. The Motown. My first job was at Motown, and I really had the idea that what we were doing, if I can speak in the collective, I hope it doesn't offend anybody. It's not the royal we, but what we were doing to me was kind of disposable because the records would shoot up the charts and they'd shoot down the charts. And I think that you would look at it from a practical viewpoint and say, how important can these songs really be?
Right.
Like MacArthur Park was on the charts for 13 weeks, I think, maybe. Well, that that doesn't that's not promising any real longevity,
Right.
you know. And so for me, it's utter, I mean, stunned disbelief that here I am, 76 years old. Yes, I'm 76 years old.
Congratulations.
Uh, I don't feel 76. At the same time, I can't. I have to tell you, I wish I could switch those digits. I wish I was 67 because I love it so much. I love being here. I really do. I've learned to There were times when I was miserable in my life, but I have learned to love being here. And I desperately do not want to leave, but I'm 76.
But
So I look at things differently. And one of the things that's an eternal reward, I guess, is that that music survived. The 60s music survived. And in fact, it skipped generations and survived.
it really, when I say it, I believe it was a renaissance of commercial art. There was a quality. Think about The Godfather. Think about the movies. Think about the books that were coming out. There was a renaissance of commercial art that I know it sounds like I'm putting down pop music or the comic book movies, but they are the disposable, enjoy it, throw it away. And here we are 50 years later. I'm playing the Beatles. I'm doing this podcast. I do breakfast with the Beatles. We could fill we could fill the Beacon Theater just doing the live breakfast with the Beatles with the band that we do to celebrate their birthdays. And I did the math one day when Sergeant Pepper's was re-released and it went to number one. And I said, that's like in 1967 if they had released Begin the Begin and it was the number one record. That doesn't usually happen. Your generation's music is yours. It doesn't usually keep going and keep going. And I always, whenever I've been interviewed, I said it's about the quality of the writing that was going on at that time. Where even Motown, as you mentioned, Mickey Stevenson is a dear friend of mine. I love Mickey, who wrote Dancing in the Streets. And he
Right.
said,
I love that song. Yeah.
isn't that great? It was
Yeah.
one of my, again, sometimes I forget I'm talking to the songwriter and not the performer. And I said, I said to Mickey, you like Van Halen's version of that? He said, do you play it? I said all the time. He goes, I love it. I'm like, got it. That's right. All right. Just an elliptical thought. One of the most embarrassing moments, I had Eddie and Brian Holland on from Motown, Holland Tozier. Holland wrote all
Yeah.
those hits, Supremes, and I said to Eddie, do you like the Beatles version of your song Postman, Please Mr. Postman? And he leaned into the mic, said, do I like it? And I thought, oh shit, I really offended him. He goes, biggest goddamn check I ever got in my life. Oh, right. Because who cares who sang it? It's the check.
Well, most songwriters will say, I loved it and I kept the money. We all come. Oh, I'm reminded of Sammy Khan, who was from that generation.
Right.
Sammy Khan had like, I think, 90 songs recorded by Mr. Sinatra. 90 songs.
90, right.
And he used to say, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. We get paid for this. That was his response to the whole zeitgeist of being a songwriter. It's a miracle, and it is a miracle that some people are trying desperately to extinguish, I might add, because some people don't think that we deserve to be paid any amount of money, a significant amount of money for writing songs.
It is sad, sad, sad. Because what changed in your era, like you mentioned, Tin Pan Alley. There's a building where some people write songs, and as Carole King told me, they locked her in a room, and you had to slip 4 songs out under the door before they unlocked it every day. I mean, that's a modified prison sentence with music and some gash. But what, John and Paul start writing their own songs. We're going to write our own songs. People want to write their own songs, and you're allowed to perform even if you don't have a big pompadour. And I always thought, because of that, Carole King gets to sing her own songs instead of handing it off to a pretty girl with big
She
boobs.
set the stage for a lot of songwriters to sing.
Right.
That's for sure.
When would Paul Simon ever be allowed, this little Jewish guy from Queens, ever get up and sing on stage as opposed to the big handsome guy who's already established? It broke the status quo, which is why you guys have to go see Jimmy Webb.
I'm sure, by the way, that Paul Simon would love to smack you in the chops right now, but.
No, actually, we talked about that. I mentioned to him, like, when would you get an, if it wasn't for, it was never done before, suddenly bands are writing their own music.
Yeah.
No, we hired these guys. We have these chimps in a building, and they'll Lieber and Stoller, and they'll hand you songs. Like, no, we want to write our own. And I honestly, again, I love the Beatles. If they weren't such a phenomenal success writing their own songs, maybe the Cats don't get a chance to sing their own songs. Maybe they will see that doesn't work.
Well, you know what? I have to say just quickly that that Lieber and Stoller were geniuses in their own right. And when they came on the scene, one of the things that Mike said to me one time, uh, he said, you know, when we first met, he said, and my partner said, let's write some songs. And he said, okay, just as long as it's not about Moon and June and Spoon. And you go back and you listen to their catalog, and it was really subversive. It was really like, uh, let's get mom and dad, basically, right?
Right.
And that's really the spark behind rock and roll is really let's get mom and dad. Let's write something that they won't like.
Right.
Uh,
Well,
there was a difference in the '60s in that that was there, the the uh, the revolutionary or you know the complete disgust with the older generation. It was there, but there were some really potent factors that were still present, that were borrowed from these preceding generations of songwriting. And those factors were chord structure, melody, form, you know, verses, choruses, bridges, the technical end of songwriting that sort of pieced together a beginning, a middle, an end, the great title, the great intro, the great fade. Hey, the great fade, man, you've lost that love and feeling. Those were all pieces uh, of the construction side of it that I think helped ensure its longevity, because the stuff that we hear today, and really, I'm not trying to be demeaning, but I really don't know what to say about it because I can't really tell one song from another.
I was just going to say, and you know, maybe it's turned into grandpa and get off my lawn. But to me, if you
Yeah,
don't see the artist singing it, just hearing it after it's gone through the computer and everything is quantized, it really doesn't matter who's singing it because it all comes out pitch perfect, same tempo, quantized, as opposed to sometimes songs sped up or slowed down.
well, that's the whole hey, the drum machine.
Yeah.
That was the harbinger of doom for you know, like real musicians, you know, because it could never be more perfect than a drum machine. And so now we have the perfect vocal, we have the perfect rhythm, you know, groove, and then we have these little chants that are not lyrics exactly. The lyric has disappeared to a certain degree, even since since Whitney Houston, since Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson sang a lot of lyrics. They were great lyrics. There was some good lyric writing there. The Man in the Mirror.
Yeah.
There was some songwriting going on there. We've lapsed into a kind of a oh well, I don't know how much work goes into it, but let's come up with a chant, a repeatable thing. Like some of the things are not repeatable, by the
Yes,
way.
exactly.
And then let's say them over and over and over again. Then we'll go to it'll be an instrumental for a while, and then maybe there'll be a little rap section. Then we'll go back to the chant. We'll chant that over and over, and we'll produce the. I started to say a very bad.
It's a podcast. You can say it. You can
I
say produce. You
we'll,
can,
we'll produce the shit out of it, right?
right.
But basically, when we're finished, there's not much there. There's nothing to really dig into. It's not Eleanor Rigby, that's for sure.
When you start a song with picture yourself on a boat on a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies. When most people who request that song from me are teenagers.
Yeah, it's
And this is 2022, Jimmy.
it's imagery.
It pulls you in, which is exactly it's imagery that is what you built. If I could get my water to you through the Zoom, I would.
No, that's all right. I'm just one of those red cans out of there.
Got
Okay.
it. When you talk about the great writing, the structure and stuff, I sorry for going back. I love all the music. The Highwaymen, just also beautiful, breaks my heart. Galveston, but there's a couplet that you wrote that, to me, if I had to sum up great songwriting, and I need you more than want you. What? That's selfish. And I want you for all time. And the resolve in the next line. It's fucking brilliant.
Well,
That is such great craft because you catch me. That's really, and you turn it, and that's what I'm talking about. It's not, you don't need a dictionary for it. It's the way you presented the emotion that, got it. It's just so well done.
well, again, I have to say I would like to take some sort of credit for having crafted
You should. You should.
this thing, and but I have to say in the same breath that to me a lot of times it feels like a connection that I've just opened a kind of loop, a feedback loop, and there's this other collaborator, this kind of ghost, and when I'm stuck, he comes up with this. He comes in like, you know, Captain America with the exact word there, or the exact line that I need. And gee, I don't know who did that, but thanks a lot because that fits perfect. And I think a lot of songwriters sort of get that feeling. I hope they do, because I hope I'm not the only one. Because I think it's almost an unfair advantage if you have God working as your co-writer.
In anything, in
Yeah,
poetry, in music, in a play, in writing a play, a scene, whatever it is that force pushing you along.
right.
Brian Ray is Paul McCartney's guitarist now for 15 years, like longer than he was in the Beatles or Wings. And we talked about his songwriting, and he said, we're sitting in the lounge at JFK, and he's looking over the itinerary, and he just starts singing a song, and it's something I never heard before. And I said, "Hey, what's that, boss?" He goes, "What? Yeah, what were you just singing? Oh, was it any good? Yeah." He goes, it'll come back. And he said, "I just like, people spend their whole lives looking for one. If you have one, if you get that lucky, you can spend your lifetime looking for number two." And this guy, just sitting there chewing gum, is, it flows through him, the muse, whatever word, God, we want to use. There are certain people who I really believe, without getting too, you're open to it. The antenna is up. John Lennon sees a poster in a window while they're shooting the movie Help that says "Being for the benefit of Mr. Kite." That a
Oh,
million people
yeah.
walk by, and he goes, "Give me that poster." Why was that a song? Because he saw it. Why is this song? Why is Up Up and Away that you were writing as a young man? How did that just fill us and hit the times? If you don't mind, Jimmy Webb, by the way, is my special guest here, talking songwriting and music on Ken Dashav's Beatles Revolution. The story that you told on stage once, am I correct in remembering that you were thrown out of school for writing because you were working on Up, Up and Away and not on your lessons? Is that correct?
Well, it's. I There was a lot of not doing my lessons. I mean, that was a daily recurrence. But that particular day, I'd been out and actually flew in a balloon with a friend of mine, um, who was a pretty bright guy, and he was a DJ. And he said,
Yay, yay,
he,
DJs.
he said he wanted, we wanted, I'll try to make this as brief as I can, but he said he wanted, and this is a pretty good idea. He loved these balloons, these big, colorful, standing inside of one and looking up inside of it. It's like being in church. And this silent flight and just this whole zeitgeist. Um, and he said he wanted to do a beach blanket bingo movie, like a Frank A. Avalon, Annette Funicello movie, but out in the desert. And instead of surfboards, we would be flying balloons. And could I write a song for it? And because he was a DJ and he was actually on KMEN San Bernardino,
Okay.
he was a K man. And I said, I fell all over myself getting over to Valley College, where I was trying to do a couple of years of education. Really trying.
That sounds like a penal colony more than a secondary school, but okay.
We had a great choir director there, Otto Nealens. And so I snuck into the practice rooms. There was a basement full of practice rooms. And I snuck in the practice room down there, and I wrote Up, Up, and Away for this movie. It was going to be the opening title and the theme song for this never to be seen or heard of again movie. And Up, Up, and Away was his title. He said, the friend, he said, let's call it Up, Up, and Away. Up, Up, and Away was something that Superman said in a 1940s radio show.
Totally.
And if you go back and you listen to that, just before Superman would take off, he would say, up, up and away. And then there'd be a sound effect like whoosh, you know, for the folks at home to imagine Superman, you know, flying away.
Right.
And so I, you know, it did take me long. I think I did it, honest to God, you don't get points for speed in songwriting, but I think I did it in about an hour or so, and I had it done. And somebody caught me down there writing, which was frowned upon. And then years later, I went back and I visited the college, and there were signs on all the practice room doors that said, no songwriting. And I thought, I did that. I did that.
Yes, well done, Valley College. Well done. Don't let these kids, whatever you do, don't let kids in the music program write songs.
Yeah, because that's going to rot their brains and prevent them from becoming, you know, I don't know. And I have to say at the same point, though, that Russell C. Baldwin, who was head of music at Valley College, called me into his office one day at Valley College and said, Jimmy Webb, he said, if you want to write songs, why don't you write goddamn songs and get out of my college?
Which is the smartest thing anybody could have said. Yeah.
It was the best thing that ever happened to me.
It's amazing if you're born. I mean, you have, like you said, you have to study craft. It makes the songs better. But either it's that thing you have to do. As a kid, I wanted to be a ball player, and you know everything was baseball. But listening to the radio, listening to your songs on AM radio here in New York, for whatever reason, as a kid, that voice, that friendly voice in my room, saying good morning or how you doing today, I just had this thing of like, I would love to do that. I'd love to be the guy in the radio saying, listen to this great song. How are you doing today? And
I miss DJs. I miss B. Mitchell Reed, Clark. I miss the Real Don Steele in LA we used to listen to all the time. But all over the country, I miss those guys, that paradigm. He was the high school student's friend. He was, you know, he could say, all right, I'm going to be at the parking lot at the corner of 7th and Tutti Frutti, you know, at 11 o'clock Friday morning for Toys for Tots.
And everybody
would be there.
Of course.
And it was community. And it was really, really good, I thought, for social dynamics. Because if you think about Top 40 and these jocks and the way they related to the kids, the playlist was completely inclusive. You'd hear a folk song, then you'd hear an R&B song, then you'd hear, you know, maybe something that you couldn't even tell, you didn't even know what it was, like maybe Ahab the Arab or something like that.
A goofy song.
You know, something goofy, and then I mean, all day long it was completely inclusive. So white kids were listening to black kids' music, and black kids were listening to white kids, and it was okay. It was okay.
Well, it was okay to us. it was terrifying to the government. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, Alan Freed, all the people who paid the biggest price. The real danger was that black kids and white kids were hanging out together and dancing, and nobody had a problem. And we can't have this in America. We can't have that kind of, because
No,
you know where that's going to lead.
well, we certainly don't have it now. So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
that
Jimmy,
that's what
excuse me.
that's where rock and roll was, I think, something so positive in the social fabric that is now kind of by design or just by some kind of evolutionary fate. The market, we've divided the market into these discrete sectors of people who, I only listen to reggae, and I only listen to classical, I only listen to new country,
Yeah, I
not
can't stand it.
old country.
I
All
can't
of that,
stand it.
it's like it's really so, these discrete groups of listeners that don't respect each other's music at all. So
It's
that's not healthy.
now look, the Beatles. They when they were told they're playing a segregated show in Jacksonville, said, "Not a chance. We'll give you the money back. We've never heard of such a thing. Either everybody can come or nobody comes." And
Wow.
64.
Yeah.
That's still pretty damn edgy. But these guys, the money was there, and that when you have the big stick, if you can wield it for good like they did, like I'm so impressed. The easiest thing is to say, look, it's not our country, it's not our place to say. For them to go, no way, we're not doing that. Jimmy Webb, my guest, you got to go see him. City Winery, Friday, October 7th. The book, The Cake and the Rain. I learned so much about you. I love your stories and your craft. But the interesting thing about being a songwriter in the Beatles era that I got out of it was the us and them mentality, which existed. Rock and roll. You mentioned great DJs. Scott Muni was my rabbi, my
Right.
radio dad here in New York. He was everything. And he was the guy who left AM radio to start this crazy FM station called WNEW FM. And hardly anybody had an FM radio in 67. And he like I said, he was all our dads. What his real title on at NEW? I got there in '82. Was he was Fats? He was the man. And it said, we all called him Fats. He called like Babe Ruth. He called everybody Fats. Hey Fats. Hey Fats. Paul McCartney, Jimmy Webb, Ken. Hey Fats. And
Right.
I said, Fats, what made you make that jump? Smoke takes a big drag. He goes, it's where the music was going, Fats. It was obvious. Jimi Hendrix comes like, yeah, we're done here. And I thought, yeah. But it's easier for a college student to go there in 67. You're not expecting anything. For a guy who's on ABC radio, like you said, you say one word and you sell out a concert, to
Yeah.
start this whole other kind of station, and that all the music would follow, the Doors and everything at that moment in 67 as things start to change. And in your book, The Cake and the Rain, I didn't realize that reaction was, this guy writes them like, he writes them like they used to write them. He's a real songwriter.
Yeah. They
And that,
thought
and
they
that you
thought I
were the
was.
long haired, when you showed up, you're the long haired, crazy hippie kid.
Yeah. They were all a little bit shocked by that.
Tell them what Glenn Campbell said
Well,
when
the
he first
first
saw you.
thing Campbell ever said to me, and he used to deny this, but he said it all right. Uh, and we had met at the Grammy Awards. They had taken a picture of us together, but I never I shook his hand that night. But the first time I ever walked into a studio and saw him across the room and as another person, I walked over and he did his best to ignore me for about 5 minutes. And then finally he looked up and said, when are you going to get a haircut? And so, that pretty much describes my early years in Hollywood, because I wanted so passionately and badly to hang out with the cool kids in class, with the Beatles and with James Taylor and to some degree, I was allowed to do that. I eventually, all those guys sang on my records. I mean, I became sort of one of the guys, but it wasn't easy. I have to tell you, it wasn't easy, because we love, as a society, we love to pigeonhole our performers and
Yes.
keep them there. We don't want television actors moving to film. We
Right.
don't want film actors moving to television. We want people to be something, and then by God, we want them to stay there, you know. And the thing that I think that wasn't widely known about me is I was never really there. I was just writing everything that came into my head. And when Bones House said to me, "Could you do a rock thing that sounds classical?" That night, I was writing MacArthur Park, you know, for the association, who turned it down. But I mean, I was never there. I wasn't one thing or the other thing. And, you know, I think that's what Allen Ginsberg had in mind when he coined that word hippie, you know, that you're really open to everything. It's kind of a universal tolerance.
I mean, that song, MacArthur Park, fits in with all of the psychedelic, imagistic music that was coming out at the same time. Sergeant Pepper's, you know, of this, the clothing, this in one album, you've got, you know, you got When I'm 64, and you've got George Harrison doubling sitars and ragas, you know, taking it into a completely different direction, and coming back with John Lennon's just word masterpiece, A Day in the Life, a tone
Yeah,
poem about
fantastic.
imagery. It was what a we were open to so many ideas. There's a great moment in the film, the Get Back, that Peter Jackson made. They're playing on the roof, and they get an interview with a real straight guy. He's got the suit, the tie, the bowler hat. They said, you know, that's the Beatles up there. And he said, they changed. Damn right they changed. You're
Yeah,
damn
that's
right
right.
that they
Yeah.
changed, that they grew. All right, I'm gonna to wrap up. Just a couple of quick punch questions. The Beatles and your catalog. If you had to pick a Beatles song that was your favorite, and mine would change every 5 minutes. Is there a song that you just really love that you always go back to of theirs? And what is there about it you think that really catches you?
Oh my goodness, man, that's a
I know,
800-pound gorilla of a
I
question.
know,
You know that,
I
right?
know, I do know that.
Uh, you know, a song that I think I'm always singing it somewhere in the back of my head is Michelle.
Hmm.
Michelle, my belle. These are words that go together well. I mean, that to me is as good as Wichita Lineman today. It's just, it's beautiful. It sounds French. It's, it's sort of, it's a songwriter moment. I can't explain it. It's Michelle, my belle, and it's this lovely lilting little tune, and there's such innocence about it. Of course, I mean, I have a lot of favorites. I mean, at the same time, I'd have to say, well, what about Taxman?
Right.
Taxman was pretty damn good too, you know.
And
Uh,
clearly the inspiration for that is George Harrison getting that statement going, I owe what? I owe them how much? You're
90
taking half.
90% of my income.
I'll tax the pennies on your eyes.
Yeah,
Oh my God. Okay,
you
so
know,
now
there's so much to love. What can I say?
that's exactly it. It's you know, as they say, there's no Beatles greatest hits album because you can't fit 200 songs on a CD. It's a body of work in this short 7 year period that lasts forever. But a question I've asked Paul, I've asked Ringo, and I'm asking you, Jimmy Webb, of all the covers, because you're part of that pantheon, these legendary songs, is there somebody who, I mean, not Glenn Campbell singing it, because to me, Glenn Campbell, the definitive version of Wichita Lineman or By the Time I Get to Phoenix, but what was a cover of yours that you really love that we don't know or that we're not that familiar with?
Well, I remember a 20-minute version of By the Time I Get to Phoenix by Isaac Hayes. And the first 15 minutes, he's describing what happened before By the Time I Get to Phoenix. He comes home from work and catches his wife in bed with another guy. And I don't know whether you ever heard that one, but
No, I never heard it.
that one, so you check it out.
Okay.
And I liked Isaac Hayes, but I mean, I have to admit, with that put a smile on my face for a long time.
Uh,
Uh, you know, I think that Donna Summers MacArthur Park was my number one,
Really?
and I think we're celebrating her. I think it's 44th birthday or something like that. What is it? Anniversary. Her 44th anniversary. She was like so young, so talented, so beautiful, so wonderful.
Oh.
And I wish I had done more with her, but that was a special gift. And I never even thought of that record as disco. It was just like a great vocal performance.
It was, and it brought the song to life for a whole new generation.
Yeah.
The song, something Paul had said years ago in an interview with me, but he's told on stage a lot. They asked him about Yesterday, the most covered song in music. What's your favorite version? He said, I love what anybody can do to my songs to hear where they go. I personally love Joe Cocker's version of With a Little Help from My Friends, this gospel rave up at Woodstock to define a nation.
Fantastic.
But he said, amazing. But Paul said the one I always remember the most is Elvis doing Yesterday. He goes, A, it's Elvis. But B, he's changed one word. He added one word. He sang, I might have said something wrong. Now I long for yesterday. And I always thought, no, you did. You did say something wrong. That's why she left. Not I might have. You did. You know you did. He said, but I don't think the king could admit that I said something wrong. Maybe, you took it the wrong way, or it's not what I meant. And I thought, I never thought of it.
I get that. I get that.
I never thought of it that way.
I don't think that Elvis could say that he said something wrong. He was the king.
He was the king. He was absolutely the king. Jimmy Webb, thank you so much for your time. The book, The Cake in the Rain, has filled with joyous stories about music, about life, about your journey, and it leads us to City Winery Friday night here in New York City. I'll be there. Can't wait to see you.
Hey, will you be there?
Yes, sir.
That'll be a special treat then. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
It'll be an honor. Thanks for spending time and sharing the songwriting craft. And to your lovely wife, to Laura, and to everybody, thank you so much.
My love to all the Beatles.
New York's classic rock, Q1043.